AI procurement does not mean AI strategy. The fact that you can go buy AI doesn't mean you're ready for AI just because they're buying and putting AI in place, like a chatbot.
What's one tech trend that operators are chasing that won't matter nearly as much as they think it will?
I think the industry's just going, let's slap AI on this thing, whatever that thing is, and it'll just be better. It won't. It actually could be worse.
The number one question I would ask you if you're ready to implement AI is, do you know what your resident profile is on an individual basis? Until then, you're just going to create more friction and elevate the amount of noise you already have in your processes, louder and louder and louder, and at scale.
If AI was a football player, it would be an offensive line person. If they're doing a great job, you never hear them called once in the game. And people are looking at it opposite. They're like, I got a problem, slap an AI Band-Aid on that. You're going to work less hard. You're going to deliver a better customer experience. And when you're working less hard, but delivering a better experience, you're going to make more money. All of that is possible in this industry. We're not reinventing the wheel here. We're just making the wheel a lot smoother.
From EverResi Media, this is Meet the PM, and I am your host, Jennifer Stoops. Welcome to episode 2, where we will discuss the future of property management isn't technology, it's experience. There are no two more qualified people to help lead this discussion than Reshma Block and Joe Polverari. I am very excited to welcome them back to Meet the PM. Now let's dive in.
Hi, I'm Joe Polverari. I'm the CEO of HomeRiver and prior co-founder of Pure Property Management, and before that spent the last 30 years building and running technology companies.
Hi, I'm Reshma Block. I'm the founder and co-principal of Compass Consulting and the former CTO of Tricon Residential. I'm also the co-host of the Reshma Report on the EverResi Media platform.
Reshma and Joe, thank you again so much for being here today. I want to start off with sort of perception in the industry. So what's a belief about technology and property management that you think most people in our industry would disagree with? Reshma, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. That they have an AI strategy just because they're buying AI. And so to me, I think, what needs to be imperatively understood is AI procurement does not mean AI strategy. And the fact that you can go buy AI doesn't mean you're ready for AI. I don't think a lot of our industry, especially the larger you get and the more bolt-ons you already have you figured out how to get your data ready for AI, to understand kind of where all your processes currently sit to automate with AI. And so I think the biggest issue today that I see that maybe the industry will disagree with is that they have an AI strategy just because they're buying and putting AI in place, like a chatbot.
Oh gosh, I think the one thing that, depending on the audience you ask, and so I'm looking, in our own industry and beyond the industry, I think the one thing people would disagree with is that there's actually good modern technology in the category. I mean, the reality is there's just not. There's a difference between technology that works to do something one way and technology that actually is useful and innovative and can drive improvements in the state of the art. And right now we don't have that. And when Pure or Pure HomeRiver buys a company, we typically inherit 6 to 10 different IT systems from all of the name brand PMS and component vendors out there, right? We've seen pieces of everything from spreadsheets all the way up to everything, that's supposed to be new and perfect. And it's not there. It's not built in contemplation of what is necessary today and what the future will require tomorrow, like almost every other industry. And the only other industry, and I intentionally, as an entrepreneur, have never worked in the same industry twice because that's boring. The only other industry I've seen that's kind of this hamstrung technically is healthcare, and this one, right? And the two of the top 5 industries probably in the world are intentionally slowing their pace of play on technology. And this is not a complaint as much as an observation, because I understand the commercial reasons for it, but most of the legacy vendors in the space have, a mission to acquire you as a customer and then keep you forever, no matter whether it's the right technology. Well, they always say, well, it works, right? You can manage a property, can't you? Well, sort of, but can you manage a property to deliver an experience that is the best experience for everyone who needs to interact with that system? can you do it in a way that actually creates more real business value for anyone except the vendor? And I think the answer so far in this industry, as far as I've seen, and I've only spent 30 years in technology, is no, right? And so there's got to be this mindset that look, we need to open this to the sky and let people innovate, existing players and new people to come into the industry. I mean, how many people do you think have come into the AI industry in the last 3 years? And number of millions, right? Because it's inherently a somewhat open platform that anyone can use. It's easy to get involved with. And then, I think there's a big misconception that, I'm the smartest person in the room, or Reshma is the smartest person in the room. And the answer is no, that's actually, statistically impossible. The wisdom of the crowd is always better than the wisdom of the one. And we have an industry and a technology profile in that industry that says, look, it's good enough, just quit complaining about it and pay more, rather than, okay, how do we make it better for everyone who's in that ecosystem, for owners and for residents and for property managers and vendors and bankers and financial services providers? How do you take that friction out of the system? And there's no incentive. And the worst, the double dip on bad stuff here is most of the companies in the industry, including our own, right? Because we're one of the larger players, but still relatively small in terms of number of customers or number of providers out there of property management services. Most of them are so small that they can't actually get the attention of / force change in a lot of those vendors out there. And so I think people go, the tech is good. Well, it's good enough to do your job in a way that was good enough 20 years ago, but it's not good enough today, and it's certainly not good enough tomorrow. People are going to demand much better experiences with much less friction, and none of those systems, in my opinion, and I've seen them all, are capable.
I love this, and the goal here is to have just a conversation with both of you, and so this to me, I wanted to ask sort of differing opinions. So Joe, while this isn't the world, if you will, that you would initially come from, you're an operator today, right? You mean you run the single largest third-party property management company in the country, and so what's one tech trend that operators are chasing that won't matter nearly as much as they think it will?
I would say AI for AI's sake is certainly the number 1, 2, and 3 technology trend that people are chasing. And I understand why, we're all prone to chase it. We all like shiny objects that purport to solve problems for us. But I think, if you really step back and let's solve the problem from a systemic perspective. And Reshma made the point earlier. If you really want to provide good experiences, you've got to prepare your data to be compatible with AI. And then you've got to prepare and train that AI so that it's compatible with the human beings who work in your company and who they service as customers, right? And if you're just kind of slapping things on, it's almost like, well, I'm going to put 10 Band-Aids on that cut on your leg, but you really need stitches. I mean, we're in a sort of a Band-Aid mentality right now because it's so attractive. There's so many difficult problems in the industry that need to be solved. And I think the approach right now is we're trying to solve them one at a time. A, that's cost prohibitive. B, that's not efficient. And C, the systems that we're trying to solve them on are inherently disaggregated, intentionally in the industry, disaggregated from one another. And so we're kind of, the elegance of being able to come in and armchair quarterback an industry like I have, right? So, I came in mostly as an entrepreneur, now I'm an operator and an entrepreneur. And the elegance you have is you can reimagine, you can study what has existed and imagine what's possible. And there's a simple thing, the atomic unit, we think about it this way sometimes. The atomic unit in the universe of property management is the asset, right? And everything else around the asset is just really data. There's the asset that someone's going to live in, but there's everything else is just data around that asset. And then the question is, who needs access to data about that asset? And it's different depending on who you are, whether you're a maintenance provider or a property manager. You see it all. If you're an owner, if you're a renter or a resident, everyone just needs access to data around that atomic unit. And right now, all of those data repositories, if you will, are either not in one place, not in a modern infrastructure, and or not available in the right pieces at the right places at the right time. And data, and consequently the services and experience that come from data, which every service and experience comes from data at some level, they're not in the right context. Your people talk about AI as context-aware intelligence. Well, that sounds cool. What does that really mean? It just means, in plain English, you're getting the right data to the right people at the right time and then allowing them to act on it. And right now, I think the industry is just going, look, let's slap AI on this thing, whatever that thing is, and it'll just be better. It won't. It actually could be worse. The thoughtful way to go about it is where is the data? How is the data? How do I have control over that data? And sometimes the vendors in the space make that difficult for the operators in the space. How do I get it to sit still in a way that I can then think about my ops on top of that? And once I've thought about that, where's my data? How do I get that data? How do I put operations on top of it in a way that makes sense? Then, and only then, in my opinion, you can use AI to make everything better for everybody else in that ecosystem. But it takes that kind of a mentality, which doesn't exist today universally. It takes that kind of a lift to get it there. And then once you get it there, then you can start talking about making real advances in the state of the art that remove friction, that create true business value. But right now, if I get 10 bolt-on AI pitches a week in my job. AI pitches I didn't even know I had or I needed for things that I didn't even know I did. And they were going to slap AI on top of it, and it's going to be awesome. And by the way, that'll be $4 a unit per month. I'm like, well,
and give me all your data, by the way, so that I can make my AI better and train
exactly.
And it's really a little bit of a kind of a parallel universe where I'm like, look, I understand how this is good for you, Jenny, because you're selling me bolt-on AI number 15. But show me how it's good for the people who actually do the work. Show me how it's good for the real business value outcome. Because if I bought every point solution AI thing that sits on somebody's old reskinned database from 1990, I would be so far upside down in my business, like it would last about a month. And I think that the big fallacy is, look, this AI thing will solve everything. And the reality is, there's a lot of talk in our industry about vibe coding, and I'm building this and I'm building that, and isn't it going to be great? My thesis is, most of the people who are operators running businesses in the industry, they're kind of like me. They're getting a little long in the tooth. They may not be super technically savvy, and they don't want to be, by the way, technically savvy. So the idea of them going to vibe code something that might or might not work, and then having the overhead of maintaining it and getting their data in the right place, and it's like it's a non-starter. Like, what, why would I do that? I'm just gonna take a nap instead. Why would I do that? So I think we have 5% of the industry talking about the promise of AI, and there's definitely promise, but the ability to plan and thoughtfully execute that is a huge challenge. The good news is this. We have this term we use internally. We call it the PM wedge. TM, trademark. I'm trademarking PM wedge for everybody out there. It's already been done. So the PM wedge is, you think about, we're the control point, the orchestration point between all the constituents in the ecosystem, between technology vendors, between residents, between owners, between vendors. And so we have kind of a unique position where if we get it right, we can help everybody get along better and take a lot of friction out of the system. But we got to get it right. And right now we're just like, let's just go put some Band-Aids on that thing. Band-Aids, they're nice, but they're not useful.
Well, it's interesting, what you're saying, because historically speaking, if I go back, 10 years even, maybe 15, institutional investors were just starting to become a thing. Consolidation really didn't probably start happening, at least where it was more visible, until maybe 10 years ago. And then really started, showing up in probably the last 5 or 6. I mean, as we were a part of it with Legacy Pure, it was starting, but I feel like we helped, really bring that to the forefront. But you have, a lot of these smaller operators. You both come from backgrounds where, Pure started out smaller, but most certainly, as far as third-party property management, is the single largest in the country at the moment for third-party property management. And these companies, if I look at myself back when I was an operator, before I had been with a company such as Pure that understood tech, I didn't understand it. So you have all these smaller operators out there that are being sold, all these things. They don't even understand what it is. Vibe coding, if you say that to 90% of the NARPM world, they have no idea what that even is. And so it's very interesting to see. I feel like a lot of people almost, I don't want to say get taken advantage of, but they don't even know what they're signing up for. So they're just continuing to pile on and pile on and pile on and not know. And so, Reshma, it'll be interesting. I'm curious, kind of giving you, looking at something. I thought it'd be fun to do sort of opposing views, if you will. So what's one technology trend that operators aren't paying enough attention to?
Well, I think the trend around orchestration. So chatbots have been around for over a
Mm,
decade, and the fact that everybody is doubling down on chatbots, maybe even eliminating, leasing agents, customer service agents to be able to have a chatbot spam you, if you're a prospect looking at a home, and follow up. That's what people seem to be paying attention on. What they're not paying attention to is the orchestration piece of it. And so just doubling down a little bit on what Joe was saying earlier around the data, the number one question I would ask you if you're ready to implement AI is, do you know what your resident profile is on an individual basis? Does your vendor know? Do all your other partners know? And if you can answer that you have a resident profile, all the information about the resident, whether it's their household composition, their maintenance history, their preferences, communications, benefits, sentiment, all of that in a profile that you can keep providing to other vendors, you are AI ready. Until then, you're just going to create more friction and elevate the amount of noise you already have in your processes, louder and louder and louder, and at scale, quite frankly, to where it's going to be so impossible to manage. You're going to have to start pulling it out. And I do see people starting to pull out technology who weren't ready for it. So orchestration to me, again, just double clicking on what Joe was saying earlier around reimagining things. This is a golden opportunity. Again, I can't decide if this is the worst time to be a CTO or the best time, but it's a golden opportunity to reimagine your people, your skills, and your processes so that that next foundation of technology is actually built on something that's better, right? And I don't think that people are paying enough attention to that. So orchestration is how they should be thinking about things. How am I going to orchestrate the ideal experience for the customer, for the owner, for the investor, for the vendor, whatever, end to end before I start throwing a bunch of AI on top? And can I provide them with a resident profile?
So let me comment on that because I think Reshma's like really on to something that's a little bit of I'll call it a quasi-technical term, this whole thing of orchestration, right? So we all know what an orchestrator is, where there's, some leader that tells everyone when to play and how to play and slaps them with their little stick if they don't play it right or whatever. But that's the, sort of plain English orchestration. But in technology, orchestration is what Reshma was alluding to. There's all these different things, and think about it. Property management is about 6 inches deep and 10 miles wide, right? There's not a lot of deep thinking that has to go on to move someone in and move them out, but there's a heck of a lot of coordination of steps or orchestration.
yes.
And all of that orchestration can be done really 3 ways. One is in the property manager's head, which is most prolific today. I take data out of one system, I put it in my head, I put it in another system. You do that 5 times and tell me if you're even still conscious, right? The other is in some of the technology solutions that exist today, but they don't talk to each other and they don't want to talk to each other. So that makes the assembly of what we'll call the universal customer record, right? It makes it tough to get it and then forget about maintaining it. And then the third place it's done is, a combination of all those processes. That orchestration, here's the bad news. It's done about as inefficiently as it can be done in the world today. Like we actually made videos of people managing properties in the early days of Pure. They go like 2 hours in length. And there's a series of what we call 20-minute problems that are mostly created by people having to do human-driven orchestration. So that's the bad news. That's how it works today. No matter how techy people think they are, the systems just aren't there to support them. The good news is there probably is no other industry that is as open to, could be benefited by, conducive to the use of AI because it's simply orchestration. And so then you get into, okay, assume your data's in the right place at the right time. So then how do you do property management? Well, as you know, Jenny, sometimes I'm, a bored student of the game, so I sit around and think about what's possible. Like, imagine if you will, your data's in the right place and in the right kind of technology stack where you can basically arbitrate its content and its direction across, the ecosystem of people who need to use it. My thesis to you, and I'll prove this, I predict over time, Pure HomeRiver will prove this. You can actually run most of property management with what we call 8 agent life cycles. So an agent life cycle is something like a move in, move out, a lease, a maintenance request, an eviction, something like that. You can run most of property management, at least on the retail front, with kind of these 8 agents running life cycles. And then they're managed by a master agent who basically, that's the orchestration layer. So these agents do these things and they're orchestrated by the master agent, and they all hang, now I'll use the technical term that all the vibe coders like, on an MCP server or an MCP background or a backbone or a harness. All those buzzwords we're all going to learn more and more about. But basically, you can manage properties with 8 agent life cycles and a master agent sitting on an MCP server or servers. And then you need human beings for really 2 things. One is, as those life cycles churn along, they're going to throw exceptions. Well, this doesn't look right. This doesn't look normal. So tell Jenny she needs to look at this because it doesn't fit the case. Mm-hmm. And so you'll get involved, but instead of logging into your system of record and deciding what to go do, you'll log in and it will say, these 3 agents have thrown 8 exceptions. Here they are. Please go deal with them now. And then you will just make a decision how to do it, and the agent will go execute that decision in the background. And then the other place where human beings will become involved is when you want them to be. So in an exception case, they have to be. There's lots of places you want them to be. Reshma's one of my best owners. Let me call her today because it's her birthday, March 15th. Now I'll call Reshma on March 15th, to use a prior example, and wish her a happy birthday and just thank her for being a customer and ask her, can I tell her how well her property's doing or not doing, and should she buy another one of these? So there's a whole relationship building status piece of it. And I will tell you, in this industry, people generally have what I would call, a good user interface. They're nice people, right? And you want to talk to them. And so the more people you can talk to, the better it goes, the more loyalty they have. But you can't do that and you can't be effective in it unless you're really focused on, okay, what are the problems in the business today? How do I deal with them quickly and efficiently? And everything else just blends into the background. And then how do I spend my time building relationships where I can get more business and add more doors, which is a continual problem in this industry, right? What's my churn and what's my organic growth? And you can do this on technology, but only when, to Reshma's point, which is the right absolute point, don't think about any of this other stuff until you get your data right. And then don't think about anything with your data until you get your ops process right, whatever it is, whatever your ops process is. And then you think about uplifting it with AI. But the AI is never in your face. It's always kind of under the surface, in the background. If AI was a football player, it would be an offensive line person where if they're doing a great job, you never hear them called once in the game, right? But people are looking at it opposite. They're like, I got a problem, slap an AI Band-Aid on that. I got another problem, slap an AI Band-Aid on that. And by the way, I have to pay for that. And by the way, it might just go non-linear on me because I don't have the right data and I can't get the right data. And it's like, it's not a doom loop, but it's an exercise in frustration, right? The definition of madness is like keep doing the same thing again and again and again and hoping it will get better.
Don't change it. Mm-hmm. Your
We've
whole
just moved that into the AI. We've moved it into the digital age now, right? So, we're now at the level of digital madness instead of just, regular analog madness.
Yeah, can you imagine if your entire offensive line was just quarterbacks, like how people are thinking about AI? Like, what would you do?
Be a lot of balls landing on the ground.
Right. I got a new acronym for you, Joe. Instead of MCP, made me think of something, resident continuity platform. We have to stop calling it an operating platform. And if we're actually going to leverage AI, we got to really think about it. Is we just got to continue the resident experience seamlessly. They shouldn't feel handoffs. They shouldn't feel silos. They shouldn't feel process changes and owners and things of that nature. RCP.
I like that. I'm going to have the t-shirts made. I'll send you.
Okay, sounds good.
I love it because what I'm hearing from both of you, I mean, look, I know enough about technology just to be dangerous and how to use it, and that's not a whole lot, and it's a world that both of you have come from in some capacity, and so property management, in my experience in the industry, has been very reactive. But what both of you just shared is what can be done to make us a proactive industry, using tools and technology to create better experiences for our teams, for the residents, for the vendors, for the customers, our clients. Because Joe, I can remember we used to call them, I think internally, I know at branch by branch, we called them touch point calls. We were utilizing tech in order to help us get to our highest and best use, which was building the relationship. How do you grow organically? People want to do business with people that they trust. And so you have to put tech in place where you can to go create opportunities for that team to be able to reach out to a Reshma, like you said, and wish her a happy birthday. Or, hey, Reshma, this market is doing really well right now. You've got 2 rental properties here. Here's what we know about the market where you're already invested in, or here's some other just opportunities to go and continue to grow that business and build the relationship. Because that way, when there's a maintenance issue and I have to call Reshma and tell her, The hot water heater needs to be replaced. But the only time Reshma ever hears from me is when something is catastrophic. Reshma doesn't want to hear from me anymore. And I've created a negative experience in relationship with Reshma because I'm creating a reactive relationship with her than being able to be proactive in that. So I love what you both have shared with respect to tech.
There's actually a term for that, right? It's the next best action. If you know your resident, you know the customer profile, you're keeping track of all the interactions, your next best interaction or next best action with them is going to be appropriate. It's not going to seem like, you're coming out of left field, only adding insult to injury at times, right? Sending them a renewal when they just opened 6 work order requests, right, regarding their home,
Yes.
like timing of
Hello.
everything. And that's where tech can really exacerbate operational problems and processes if you
They can't
haven't
see
figured
it.
out how to address the next best action, excuse me, the MBA, with the appropriate situation. So yeah.
So that's totally correct in my opinion, and it's a very sophisticated lens on the like. So of course I want to take the next best action, but how do I get to what that is in context, right? In this situation, because my next best action with Jenny might be different than my next best action with Reshma, and how do I know which is which and how do I do it? And I think you can keep stapling AI on, and you're going to run out of staples sooner or later. Or you can think about it systemically. And this is the good news for all of us property managers, operators in the industry. Get the system right with the data right, and there are ways to do that. That will become more evident as we go forward. And here's what you're going to get out of it. You're going to work less hard, which is always good. You're going to deliver a better customer experience. I know this to be the case because we're seeing it already in our own business. And then when you're working less hard but delivering a better experience, you're going to make more money. And these are all, last time I looked, mostly for-profit enterprises. I love the sales pitch of, I can work less hard, I can give better service, and I can make more money. All of that is possible in this industry. We're not reinventing the wheel here. We're just making the wheel a lot smoother.
We have an experience gap, right? And so that's something I want to talk about with you guys is this experience gap. But before we go there, I want to ask you one question that I think would be a little bit fun. If I gave you a blank sheet of paper and told you to redesign the property management experience from scratch today, what's the first thing you would stop doing?
The first thing I would stop doing? Oh gosh, there's many things that I would stop
I know.
doing.
How do you pick one?
But honestly, the first thing I would stop doing is making all of my property management professionals, who are by and large very excellent and loyal people, arbitrate their way through all these disaggregated broken systems. If I could wave a magic wand, what would I stop doing? I would allow them to change the way they work, to focus on managing the problems that are real problems. That's Reshma's next best action. So I got to have a way to give it to them. And then being their, highly interpersonal selves with our customers, so that our customers are attached to us and not so prone to go somewhere else. And to do that, you have to reimagine the technical architecture of the category, which is something we've been doing for a while. And, we'll find out in the next little while here if it works. But I think that the existing, think about when you go to a doctor. Your poor doctor is working in 10 different systems, and none of them are. Sometimes they both use, the two 800-pound gorillas are Epic and Cerner, right? And Epic and Cerner don't always talk to each other well. And you just want to know, is my knee blown out or not? I can't tell because one scan was done in Epic and the other one was done in Cerner. Like, that problem doesn't need to exist in the modern world, and it still exists in our industry. So I would actually tell them, stop using what you're using and just focus on being you. And being nice to other people. Now, that's a little bit of an impractical wish because you can't just wave a wand, but we're getting closer to not so much waving a wand, but being able to re-architect the way these systems work and work among one another, that'll be possible. Because I think at the end of the day, this is a highly personal business, nicest people of any industry I've ever been in. And if you just take all that friction, much of which is self-created, out of the way and allow them to be people talking to other people, the good news is if you're getting into property management, AI is not going to work you out of a job. It's going to help you do your job better. And AI is never going to work you out of interacting with another human. It shouldn't, right? The whole point of AI is to help you. We have the thought of AI can be good, but we have the what. AI is going to be useful. We don't always universally have the how yet.
Yeah, I would definitely stop organizing around departments. That if I were to do this from scratch, I would stop and redesign property management where we're not, where the internal functions become, the org chart that the resident then has to figure out how to manage, right?
Right. Who do they need to go
Um,
to? Because they don't have a
leasing
person
owns,
anymore.
right.
Yeah.
Leasing owns one piece, maintenance owns another, accounting owns, security deposits, customer service is somewhere in between all of that. The resident doesn't care what our org chart looks like. And that's what we become at scale is, the residents have to be good at managing our org charts. And instead of really focusing on, the fact that this is an asset first industry, which is very bizarre. I'm thinking crazy town talk now, that we're a customer first industry. Because if you think about where we're heading with legislation, our asset could be manufactured homes, our asset could be a duplex or a triplex in the future, our asset could be scattered site, or asset could be whatever. But the
ADUs are
tech
huge now.
ADUs are huge, but the tech foundation, we're really a tech first company. So if I were to do this from scratch, and I think this is where Joe came in 5 years ago thinking this way, is think tech first, layer on, the assets that help you ultimately grow. And now that we're in the position we're in with pending legislation, it's going to be even more important. So I would totally stop organizing around departments and function and more around that, journey.
So let me just comment on that because what Reshma said was really smart for a couple of reasons. One is this, what I'll call over departmentalization. So I've seen that firsthand in this industry and in other industries. And that's a fallacy because when you have a lot of people doing a little bit of something, but the handoffs are not clean and they're not continuous in terms of the experience you give to the end consumer of those services, the people who are doing those services feel like they're being successful. I'm doing these great,
That's
I'm doing
right.
step 1 and 2. I'm
Yeah,
doing 1 and 2 with excellence. But what you don't know is there's a black hole of steps 3 through 10 that aren't getting done and are getting highly fragmented among other departments. And it just never, ever works to deliver a good service. There's too many sort of cooks in the kitchen, if you
it's a
will.
great way.
And they
Yeah.
all feel like they're making the best dish, but none of them actually go together, right? They don't actually work together. And what Reshma is describing, I'll put a different, because I spent a lot of time watching, military history for, I don't know why, but I do. It's the difference between the British Continental Army and the American Revolutionary Army back in the days where the Brits, they fought monolithically. They lined up a bunch of soldiers with a bunch of stuff and they just marched straight ahead. The U.S. Army, the Revolutionary Army, couldn't do that because they didn't have enough guys or gals or
Right.
equipment, and so they disaggregated into smaller, more independent units that were
Pods.
empowered pods,
Odds.
revolutionary pods. They were empowered to like run the whole combat life cycle end to end, and they did that. So if one dropped out and fell apart, okay, there was 10 others that could still cover that same territory. They weren't just incumbent upon the center to do everything, and it's very much monolithic versus smaller, elite, and more flexible. Unless you're managing 10 million doors, which none of us are, smaller, elite, and flexible, and with local knowledge, what we call hyper local sometimes, that will win every single time. And the victory is measured in what's the experience the customers get.
And that's what I think, right? You both have touched on this. We've talked about it. It continues to be sort of an issue. There's an experience gap. So technology isn't necessarily the goal. The experience is the goal, right? That's really the end game. It's the experience. So we hear buzzwords in our industry, resident experience, resident expectations, owner expectations, customer experience, friction points. These are all things. It creates this gap. So what, resident expectation creates the greatest operational challenge that you see right now in the industry? And conversely, I'll just give you both and then we can talk through it. What resident expectation creates the greatest opportunity? So Reshma, do you want to take it first?
Yeah. So I think consumers, residents have a lot of choice. In fact, when I entered this industry 6 years ago now, the number one question I asked one of the operating executives was, what happens when we go through our first downturn? Right? 5, 6 years ago, if you guys remember, you could probably charge whatever you wanted for rent. You had customers galore. And you didn't really have to worry too much about the expectation and the trust building and the experience. But I think where we're at today and where we're at with technology in general is that customers expect you to have a memory about them.
Mm-hmm.
They expect you to be very transparent, right? Or they'll call you out in 10 different ways. They want to feel like you're their only customer, even though you
Agreed.
may have 100,000 or 200,000. And then it needs to feel effortless to work with you. And I don't think that those are really big bars, right, for a customer, but it's a big bar for us in our environment today, in our industry today, because we are kind of so new. And so I think that ultimately the customers have very basic expectations that we're still working on creating, which is that transparency, that memory, that personalization. The thing that I think we have an opportunity to do better, and potentially create some interesting new tech, is around predictive, right? And maybe let's take predictive maintenance as something I tried at Tricon. It's a very hard problem to solve. Can you predict when your HVAC is going to fail? Today, most HVACs don't have enough sensor information to be able for you to gather that, but certain set points, how long it takes to hit certain set points, what the temperature is outside, all of that is gatherable data, aside from all of those additional sensors you need. And can we be smart enough to predict that so that when it hits 110 in Phoenix, and you know that your resident already took an hour to hit a certain set point, only 5 degrees difference, you better go proactively call somebody out there to go take a look at it before it fails when it's 120 degrees, right? And so I think we got to get better at the basics of customer expectations, but we also have really incredible opportunities to actually create some new tech and new experiences with the data.
Joe, how about you?
I think from a customer perspective, I think the greatest challenge is that the customer is, I want it right and I want it right now.
Yes.
And so that means whether I email you, I text you, I call you, I send a smoke signal, like someone is there at the other end to send me a smoke signal back, and they hear me as a human being. They know that I have a problem, my thermostat's not working, whatever. And then they have, okay, acknowledgement, and then they've got a plan. Well, did these 3 times work for us to send our tech out? And one of these 3 times, you pick one and we'll have them there. And a lot of that can be, a lot of that friction. I mean, typically we go, okay, hold on, I'm going to call a vendor, I'm going to get 3 bids, I'm going to send them out, and they'll be out 2 weeks from Sunday. Well, it's 110 degrees in my house in Phoenix today, so it's Sunday, 2 Sundays from now doesn't really work for me because I'll be dehydrated if not dead by then. So it's like, I want it right, and I want it right now, and that is something, again, to Reshma's earlier point, which is the correct point. If your data's right, if your data's accessible across systems, then you can actually solve that problem agentically and with human beings in a way that actually is efficient and useful. So that's always the number one problem. Am I responsive to what my customer, I mean, and think about it. You walk into a store and you say to the clerk behind the counter, I would like a pack of bubble gum. And they go, great, we have 5 kinds. Which one do you want? And they hand it to you and you're done. It needs to be quite, it won't ever get to that level, but it can get close to that level where I heard
Sure.
you, Jenny, we got someone on the way, no problem. So that's the biggest challenge. I think the biggest opportunity is, you talk about the ecosystem of people that revolve around what I called earlier the PM wedge, right? The property manager just kind of arbitrates these relationships through data and transactions, is to kind of create the easy button for a lot of stuff that is hard to get today, right? Well, I want to pay my rent these different ways, or I want to pay it twice a month instead of once a month, and I'm willing to pay a little bit more if I can have that convenience. Or if I'm an owner, oh gosh, I'm an owner of an asset in California, it's so hard to get insurance. Can you guys help me find that? Or, I got to get a HELOC because you told me I got to refi or I got to replace my roof, and that's $30,000. So how do I get that? All of these are services that have friction inherently built into them, where I was like, darn it, Jenny told me I got to get a new roof, so now I got to go call my local banker or go online and try to find a lender. And these are all services that as the property management company, correctly equipped, which I believe that as an industry we will become correctly equipped. We go, oh, Jenny, just click here and we'll take care of that for you. Would you like a short-term line of credit to put that roof back on? Or by the way, while you're thinking about it, if you replace your appliances, you can raise your rent by $500 a month and improve your net operating income, and we'll finance it. I mean, the list is endless and myriad in terms of what services you can supply on the top of your PM wedge here that are hard for people to get. And by the way, all of those services are now being consumed outside the ecosystem. Why? Let's bring them inside the ecosystem so that the people who work inside the ecosystem get the benefit of those, because we're just basically handpicking and delivering people who are not in our ecosystem customers, and we don't need to do that. We can keep those customers for ourselves and just bring the services to them. That's a huge opportunity. You're seeing it like, baby steps with things like resident benefit packages and things like that, but you're going to see them become larger and more material and more ubiquitous across the category. And as long as you can make it easy, Jenny, click here to put a new roof on. By the way, I got the contractor for you. Would you like to do that, or would you like to go do it yourself? I know you're at Disney World with your family right now. Would you like to take time out from that and go do this stuff, or do you want to continue your vacation and when you get back that roof will be on? I mean, all of that stuff is possible.
I was going to say just real quickly, a shout out to Joe and Pure and what you guys are developing. I think you guys are going to be the greatest example for where the industry evolves, right? Like if we think about where airlines were 15, 20 years ago and how unsophisticated they were with tech, then you got some really sophisticated tech first players in and made everybody else adopt. I feel like that's where Pure HomeRiver is really, really going to be. It's going to help reshape the industry, in my opinion.
Well, I think, in fact, I know for sure either at my old business school or a bunch of old business schools, we will be a case study. The question is it, how you do it or how not to do it? Jury's still out, but we're working as hard as we can on it every day to make sure it should be an example of one way you can do it that works.
Well, it's interesting, Joe, because what you saw as the greatest opportunity, we've touched on this already, right? One, it's a reactive industry. Two, relationship building is a key factor that you've both mentioned. We've got to build relationships, whether it's with both the resident and the owner of the property, our customers. So those things matter. And if I now have a roofing issue and I have to have my roof replaced and I don't really have a strong relationship and I don't have an easy path by which to go get this, chances are I'm going to be reaching out to the real estate agent and letting my property management firm know this isn't making me any money, because most of our owners in third-party property management, unlike institutional, are individuals that own a door. And so they don't have the sophistication of knowing the things that we may know when we're managing for a fund in an institutional platform. And so the minute that they see that something is $5,000, their brain automatically says, I'm not making any money on this. That resident could have been there for the last 7 years. But this one thing pushes them over the edge, and they don't know what they don't know, and they don't have great resources, and they feel lost. And so it takes them having this valuable asset, and then all of a sudden they're going, nope, and they want to move on to the next thing. So I agree with that logic that we have a huge opportunity there to create the easy button, and it hasn't been done yet. And it just seems, as you say it seems like it would be such an obvious thing, but heck, we've been in this space for so many years, and it's just now starting to be at the forefront where we're people like Pure HomeRiver are starting to figure it out.
I agree. One thing I will say is that there is an easy button for ordering groceries now, right?
Agreed.
Right? Like it really needs to become, I think, that simple when you order your whether it's like an Uber experience or the grocery experience. How can you get that happening at scale? Other industries have figured out how to deliver groceries to your door at scale.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. And we should all, and we used to talk about this, and I'm sure it is still talked about, delivering that Ritz-Carlton experience, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody should want to deliver the Ritz-Carlton experience. And I don't know why in our space, I think because we get overwhelmed, as an operator, you talked about the PM wedge, and then, the 8 cycles of and I used to call it the property management life cycle. And it was, but every property that you manage, whether it be institutional or otherwise, is at a different stage in that wheel of property management. And when Joe, and Reshma too, you were a CTO helping create processes from a tech perspective to help make their jobs easier. Joe, you came into this space looking at it going, holy cow, we've talked about this when I was there. It's 12 steps to do one simple thing like allow somebody to pay their rent. But a PM has to look here and then here and then here and then here and then here to answer that one question that could be consolidated into that singular step versus 12 clicks of, what do we think the average pieces of software most property managers have to use today in order to manage their portfolio? I think the last I knew it was somewhere around 12.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's been surveys.
And
Yeah.
what you're describing, Jenny, is, and what Reshma was describing around, we figured out a way to get groceries to your door, right? And so the rest of this shouldn't be that hard because, I mean, groceries are inherently personal and perishable, and then you got to pay for them too. So there's a whole lot of dimensions there. You know, the thing that's overlooked, and this is where I think, and what Jenny you're really making is the case for native AI, right? So how do you actually get this stuff context aware so that you know what's going, anyone who touches that property and the property itself, you know, because an agent is looking at it nonstop and doesn't ever make mistakes, you know what's going on. And so if it tells you what it needs, or it might even tell you what it needs, but if someone tells you what they need, you've got everything at your fingertips and agentic support to make that happen in a really seamless way. And then, by the way, every time you make something happen, that's all captured and that's all owned. And so I know better, wow, it's so weird. Jenny has had 3 HVAC calls in the last 3 weeks. So, you know, maybe it's time to replace that system and save money in the long run. And it's just like it knows your groceries. Looks like she ordered 3 bunches of bananas twice last month. So let's offer her some bananas because they're on sale. And this is it's not rocket science in any other industry except for ours. And it's only rocket science here because we've chosen to ignore it for so long. All of the systems exist to make it possible.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. And we've touched on this, right? We don't want to take the human element out. We are a customer service-based industry, and we've continued to say that. So, you know, but being a customer service-based industry, it isn't just about the resident. It isn't just about our owners that we work for. You know, it's our team as well. It's the leadership of the team internally, because, you know, we all know that it's kind of a top-down thing. And if you have poor leadership at the top, that's a trickle-down effect. And it works its way down. And you know, I used to say it's in the South. I learned, I'm from the Northeast originally, but in the South they have this stuff called kudzu, and I don't know if they have this on the West Coast as well, but they have this stuff called kudzu, and it's this viney plant that literally. I remember when I first moved to North Carolina, I saw. I thought I was driving down this road, and I was like, "Is that a car?" It was all this greenery, these vines. And I swear I saw like just the very top of like the roof of a car with an antenna. Sure enough, it was a car that was engulfed in this kudzu. And so that's kind of how I've always felt, is that, you know, we get wrapped up in this kudzu. And so when you have negativity or poor leadership or, you know, not clear, you know, processes or ways of handling things, and people feel lost, or negativity, it spreads like kudzu in an organization. And that's, you know, so you have to have this human element. So, Joe, what's the most important leadership skill that you see for next gen of operators or team members or leadership?
Well, obviously, let me say, excuse me, I've never heard the term kudzu before, but I kind of like it. So, you know, the job of a leader in that context, being context aware, is to be the machete for your kudzu.
There you go.
To cut you out from it. And what does that mean? It means, I think it means first and foremost, and people who are in Pure, who have been in Pure, they will tell you we are highly transparent about the business. Like we will tell you, we view it as your company, our company together.
You've said that always.
Let us tell you all the risks and opportunities with our company and a few ideas as to how we might solve them. And then what are your ideas? Because I think we have learned more as we've developed our tech stack and our tech profile and how we interact with systems of any vintage and any vendor category. You know, the people who do the work, who face the customers, whoever that customer is, they have got the greatest level of insight. And if you give them an avenue to sort of give you that insight, and a forum to do it, then you're going to learn more. There's I forget what the old saying is, but if you listen to a system long enough, it will tell you what what it really means. And, you know, we're fortunate to have a very big system here of people who face all different kinds of customers and all different kinds of environments, you know, from institutional through small multifamily, through single family and multiple markets. And so I think, you know, the key tenet is, look, be open and transparent with people in good times and bad. Make sure that they have an avenue to give you their experience, and then take all of that experience and figure out what is the best collection of that experience, and then how do we distill that into operations in a way that take friction and stress out of the system. That's been kind of state of play for us for the last 5 years, for HRG for the last 10 years. And now the bold new frontier, the one that's really exciting is, assume you've been running that model and it's been working, but you've been, hamstrung in your efficacy of actually implementing this stuff, and now you're not. Now you can get your data right. Now you can get process right. Now you can automate a lot of it in a way that enhances human beings. It's not to their detriment. So you've done all that work. So you know what to do, and now the how you get to do it is changing dramatically. And that's very different than saying, we got problem number one here, let's put some AI in front of it. That's not what we're saying. We're saying we've got a universe of problems and a universe of experts with tons of experience, thousands of years of collective experience who know how to solve it. They're putting that together. And so the real trick is be clear about where you are and where you're going, what the puts and takes or the gives and takes are there, what decisions you got to make sure they've got the right level of input in that, and then make the execution of whatever those decisions are collectively, make the execution of that as simple and as seamless and as painless as possible. And that's easier said than done. I remember, got way back when, a million years ago, when I got my first CEO job, a guy who hired me for it was a very famous entrepreneur in Silicon Valley. His name's Mark Leslie. And he was most famous for Veritas Software and a bunch of other companies. And I said, Mark, any advice for me as I embark upon this, new chapter, right, in the book? And he's like, look, all you can do, all you can hope to do is influence culture in a positive way. So that goes to being honest, being open, getting people's input, and really valuing it, and then saying what you're going to do with it. And then all you can do is hope to influence that positively, not negatively, because there's leaders in companies that are very positive and leaders that are also negative. And so try very much to be in the positive category. And I said the only other thing that you can do is control what happens at a macro level in the company 6 months from now. Which for a guy like me who's into instant gratification, like having someone tell you, like 6 months from now, what you decide today might be possible if you do the right things culturally, that was a lot to take on board, but he was right. And so that goes into the process. Look, make sure you got the right people as much as you can. Make sure that they get a voice always, and then try to reconcile that into the results of the business, because ultimately we all work at the pleasure of the board and the shareholders, right? So there's a but here. But that system, I think you have two kinds of people. The majority of them embrace that, and they're like, oh, someone's actually listening to me, and it might do something that I think is the right thing to do. And some people are like, just tell me what to do in my little department. And that I don't want to tell me what to do in my little department. I want someone who has ownership over the entire experience. So what is my part in creating that experience for you that is good?
I love that. And so I think we'd all agree the future isn't less human in this industry. I think it may actually require us to be more intentionally human. Right? Reshma, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think Joe said it so well. By the way, we have probably a common Veritas story, Joe. Not that I was, a CEO at one point in time, but certainly met Mark. I think empathy is going to be huge. I think, as we head into the space of AI and leveraging it more, but empathy without accountability is what's going to get us, I think, in trouble. And there are some key tells today where our industry suffers from one or the other. And I think it's only going to become a bigger issue. And those key tells are, are the residents having to become project managers and chasing down issues and getting responses and managing their challenges with living in that home? Are the residents, going to private groups, and complaining in the tens of thousands,
Oh,
right?
gosh. All the
About
Reddits.
maintenance experiences, all the Facebook groups, all of that, right? So I think there's some obvious tells to the leadership traits that we're not building for at scale, and that empathy accountability combination, I think, is one of those. And then the cross industry knowledge. To me, am going to value companies more and more. In fact, I advise probably the one native AI maintenance orchestration company in our space today that are not traditionally from real estate. No offense, right, to the real estate folks. Like, the more cross industry experience you've seen, bringing in a field services platform into Tricon, but because I did it in a different industry was like a no brainer to me,
Mm-hmm.
right? But never had it been done in real estate before, right? To go, orchestrate your technicians. And so, at a resident friendly level. And so I think, the future really of the leadership that we're going to have to continue to scale for is going to have to embed more and more accountability with that empathy, but I think hopefully from outside industries.
I like that. And that's what I've shared with the two of you. I entered this space a long time ago, but the two of you came from different backgrounds, had a different lens to look through it with a fresh perspective than those of us that have been kind of stuck, for a significant period of time. We talked a lot about AI. We've covered it. It's talked about everywhere you go. You're almost getting AI'd to death. So let's cut through the AI hype, for a second and just say what's being overstated, what's being overlooked, and where is AI delivering real ROI today? And what should operators be testing right now?
Do you want to jump on that? Because I have, Joe, I have a whole different perspective, but I love your point of view because
this is the whole reason we're doing this, right? You have different perspectives and I love it. Right. I love it. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. Okay, I was erring on the side of ladies first, but I'll go first. I'll jump off the cliff first. Look, I don't think any of the present AI initiatives are capable of solving the problems they purport to solve. And it's not necessarily their fault. I think that's born out of two things. One, we know we've beaten this horse a little bit, is like the data just isn't right across enough systems that it needs to be right across and connected through. Despite what people's marketing says, the real tech of the tech is not there. And then you've got something that's a hard problem to solve. The easier problem to solve is a lot of those agentic processes don't have enough at-bats across a lot of enough use cases to have truly learned, tuned themselves, been trained to be reliable. And so I think you get into a situation where, again, the idea sounds great. The proof of the pudding is in the eating, and right now the eating's not great. There was I think it was Wall Street Journal had an article out not long ago that said something like 75% of AI projects started in the last 3 years have already been put on the shelf. And that's through that is not an insignificant amount of investment. I think you're going to see that improve over time, but right now you'll see it improve in other industries first, for sure. And you'll see it improve in really basic, rudimentary ways. Here's an example of something that could work. Instead of when you text Jennifer, my property manager, my toilet's clogged, I get a really fast agentic response. That's basically where it stops today. But instead, I should get a fast agentic response that says, oh, that sounds like X, Y, and Z. Would you like to talk to someone to talk about it more? Or would you like to just set up an appointment? I mean, we're very good at the initial interaction, but it's basic. It's rote. It's not personalized, to Reshma's earlier point.
Right.
Oh, is that your upstairs or downstairs heating unit that is the problem? Because we don't know, right? And so there's a lot of... I think there's an inflection point where you can sort of put the puck on the ice if you're a hockey player and say, okay, we can respond to her agentically, but I can't really solve your problem agentically, which means I got to, either solve it with a human or I got to solve it the old-fashioned way on the back end, and it's not there. So I'm not a believer in point solution AI, unless you only have one point to solve, which we don't. We have hundreds. Right, I am a believer in native AI, where AI just sits in the background. Go watch the old Bruce Lee interview in the 60s or 70s, where he's like, it flows like water. That's what AI should do. It should just be there in the background to make everything better and nothing worse. And right now we're not there because we are. Look, I'm an old enough guy. I've lived through 3 hype cycles in the Valley. The first was, the early .com days, right? I was in that whole thing, and then
I'm that old too, Joe. So
second, you're looking much better than me, though. The second was, the whole fintech meltdown and the bank meltdown and rise of the fintechs, and now this is the third, and this is really the third iteration of AI. Honestly, I mean, I ran a machine learning company. That's what we called it back in 2016. I ran one of the early AI platforms. It was basically just a bunch of business analytics that hoped to be AI. And then, wave 2 was, kind of this whole agentic thing that everyone's building companies around, which are basically wrappers on LLMs that don't have much relevance to your business, quite frankly. And so in the third wave, which is the next wave, and you tell me when we'll enter it, probably sometime in the next 12 to 18 months, that's when AI will start to get really effective. But again, there can be a level of civil disobedience in an industry that's called, vendors and providers not working together from a data perspective that slows the whole thing down. And so we're intentionally getting in our own way for commercial reasons, for whatever reason it can be. And that's hindering the advancement of the state of the art. So we're going to enter wave 3 at some point. I think it's going to be in my lifetime. I'm certainly going to be a proponent of native AI in the background like water, making everything better. And I think we know how to do it. We just got to put a few more pieces in place. And when we do get it done, by the way, then that easy button becomes ubiquitous. It doesn't become a one-off or an outlier. It becomes what you think about as the way to consume services. And that will all be good for everybody in the industry. If you're a property manager, you're controlling that PM wedge, you do it right, you're going to create a lot more value for yourself, work less hard. Simple. So that's my sales pitch anyway. That's what I believe. That's what we're working toward.
Yeah, I mean, I
Reshma?
100% agree with Joe. He's seen the different waves in technology. I don't think that this is any different other than the speed at which we're moving, right, to a certain degree. And so, my perspective, the immediate thought I had is, God, my data guys, screaming, the data scientists, the data engineers, the data strategy guys and gals, all saying we're just going to make things worse if we don't fix our data, if we don't get it all into one spot, understand it, the AI is just going to cause more problems. And ultimately, what we're doing in our rush to adopt is giving away our sovereignty, is kind of how I'm saying it. So the more bolt-ons that you're putting in, the more data you're giving to others to leverage on your behalf, the more you're, eliminating your ability to be a sovereign company running your own decisions, quite frankly. I think that ultimately you're reducing your value. The more you do that. I know it sounds way out there, but I'm a trained CTO to think in terms of, worst case scenarios as well. But I do believe that where companies are going to be heading in that direction, if not already. And ultimately that's going to require them to probably have to start all over at best. Joe, I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
No, I think this is important. And this is one of those areas where age, experience, and wisdom, or at least a view on history and having lived through part of that history, are particularly insightful. And, Reshma just basically gave it to you. There's an analog for what's going on in this industry. And it was the fintech analog starting in sort of 1999 and rolling up to the present day. There was no fintech before 2006. But there were data aggregation companies that tried to get data for you as a consumer, because as a consumer, I'll tell you exactly, on average, you had between 13 and 15 financial accounts. I can tell you this because I worked in that space deeply. But those 13 to 15 financial accounts were typically spread across 6 to 10 institutions, none of whom wanted to share data with any of the other ones. And the debate was, and we spent, these wars were long and painful. We spent, literally years, decades saying, well, Reshma's data is her data. She owns those accounts, and without her interacting in those accounts, there is no data to own. And so they're her accounts. And then you had certain large banks in particular saying, well, no, that's Chase data, or that's Bank of America data. And so there was this huge debate about, should Reshma be able to see her data how and when she wants, regardless of who the custodian of that data is. And that, that literally went all the way. There used to be an organization in DC called the FFIEC, followed by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, both of which are gone, that sort of existed to try to lobby and arbitrate this issue. And the banks were just flat out not having any of it. And then the bank meltdown occurred in 2006 it started, 6, 7, 8, 9. And they were focused on other things like, oh man, are we going to be in business tomorrow? And is this whole subprime mortgage thing going to crush us all? And, roundabout, this personal story for a second, in 2006, there was a guy called Aaron Patzer who started a company called Mint, which is, now gone, but was acquired by Intuit back in the day. Mm-hmm. And we were always afraid at my company back then, Yodlee, early fintech company, to go against the banks because they gave us the data. They supplied us the data, even though we believed it was Reshma's data and not their data. And so we said, all right, there's nothing to lose now because the banks aren't buying anything from us. So we did this deal with Mint. Aaron and I did this deal. We launched Mint, and Mint took off like wildfire. And that was like really one of the
I used Mint.
Moments.
Me too.
Yeah, we all did. We all used Mint.
Intuit bought it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but that was like the light bulb moment when everyone's like, okay, this is okay to do. And now look at the fintech companies you have. For God's sakes, half of us don't even bank with real banks. We bank with neobanks, which is a good thing to do. There's companies like SoFi, and there's companies like Chime, and there's companies like Figure. And all of these folks were kind of waiting for that moment. But it all revolved around, whose data is it? How do I get access to it? And is it sitting in a form I can use? And so when Reshma says, correctly, If you're trying to do this stuff on a short-sighted basis and you're giving your data to everyone, it's your data, and not everyone has that opinion. So use your data to train your agents to do your stuff, and you will be fine. And I firmly believe the way companies will differentiate 100%. In the future, they will differentiate around how they hold, maintain, and supplement the data that they have to solve their problem. So our problem, my problem, is how do we do it better for property management? And you can put feature function on anything, but if you're doing it on the wrong data, it just gives you the wrong answer. And that is a nuance that is easy to say, but hard to deliver. But most people just think, again, point and shoot. Let's staple some AI on that. That is not right, because you're stapling AI on your data and everybody else's data, and their data is not like your data. It doesn't suit your purpose. Only your data suits your purpose. So understand what that should be, how to put it together, and then deliver your service on top of that. That's how companies will build what we used to call a competitive moat. Right? They won't build it because they can code better or faster than you. I mean, Codex and Claude code better than faster than anyone almost, if you know how to talk to them. What you will differentiate on is what is the quality of the service that you can deliver on top of that, how proprietary is that to you, and that is driven by data.
This is exactly why I wanted to have this conversation with the two of you, because the perspective and the synergy is there. And so, as we kind of close out our session, I mean, I know we could go on, and the nice thing is I believe Reshma and Joe, somewhere in our future on the EverResi platform, I think the two of you will be having a deeper dive on this type of a discussion. But as we're looking forward to, the next 4 to 5 years in the industry, the industry is transforming. There's emerging opportunities. Business models are changing. Leadership is changing. We're refocused on how we're, training industry leaders. When you look at the road to 2030, who will experience the biggest transformation in our industry? And what do you think the rest of us are missing? Reshma, do you want to start that one?
Yeah, I'll take it. Thank you. I'll go maybe like 10,000 feet up and not point to a specific person or operator. But I think the operators that win in this space are truly going to look at their technology as part of their balance sheet, right? Not at the below the line depreciation down to zero part of the balance sheet, but truly as a value. To their industry. I think that the companies that win will be investing in technology as not a secondary, I have to have this to solve a single problem, but actually it's going to be a pertinent part of how my company is valued down the road. And so I believe in 4 or 5 years, those operators that think that way, that shift to that. And I do also believe we've now changed for the first time in 30 years in tech from a buy versus build debate and error on the side of buying most of the time to now building most of the time, because of how easy it is to build software. We're now in infinite software land to a certain degree, right? And so I do think that companies that, to Joe's point, that really invest in their leveraging their data on their own and invest in platforms that leverage data on their own to provide the best superior experience will be able to ultimately value that tech stack as part of an asset on their balance sheet in my crazy, siloed technology head.
And Joe?
Well, I don't think Reshma's head is that crazy, actually. I think it's pretty spot on if you're looking at the bigger picture. But I think that the greatest changes will come to two parties. One is the property management company, so the arbiter, controller, or provider of that PM wage, right? So the systems are changing so rapidly. It's our responsibility to make sure they change in a way that's good for the industry. And I think that's tough to do when you've got 40,000 participants in an industry that do it 40,000 different ways. It's just with varying levels of strengths and development areas, right? You're just going to get it's kind of like a bowl of spaghetti, right? There's like a bunch of different stuff in there going on. And so how do you smooth that out, right? How do you simplify that? So big changes for property management companies. I do think what I call internally APM, or agentic property management, TM, trademark, whatever you want to call it. That will exist. That does exist. It will work. It will fulfill the need to resolve cases and problems more quickly with humans, and also allow humans to flourish by talking to other humans. So I think big changes coming in for property management companies and how they work. I'll tell you right now. I'll give you one case study. We have a whole different kind of, as we review candidates to be property managers, we don't have any kind of stereotypical lens that you had to be in property management for 20 years. In fact, some of the more successful people in our company are newer property managers, and I will not name or embarrass them here, but I think they're awesome, and they know it. They come from service industry backgrounds. They were managers at a chain restaurant. They were managers in a hospitality business, and they're just
Joe, I was a dental hygienist before I came into this field.
They're good at showing up
for you,
happy.
Reshma.
Right? So they're good at showing up happy, and a lot of the other people who've been in the industry a long time, they want to be happy. So if you give them the infrastructure that they can focus on the being happy part, that shows, that resonates. So big changes driven by technology coming for property managers. I think the other big set of changes are coming for owners. And we talked about this a little bit earlier. They're coming in the context of your government, pick your government, wherever you are, is going to make it more complex for you to own a rental property. And pretty soon you're going to be up to your eyeballs in regulations and what you can do and you can't do. And so you're going to want to have some kind of professional, almost at any cost, do this for you, because it is such an abstraction. And so if that party who does it for you can come in and say, well, we can take this away from you from a labor perspective, we can turn it truly into mailbox money. And then, by the way, we can make the experience so frictionless, and we can actually show you how to make the mailbox money grow, which is where I think we need to go as an industry, more of a, not an actual advisor, but more of a facilitator of financial services to you. We can create more value for you. Then that will be great for the industry and great for the people who want to be in the industry, and consequently more people will want to be owners, because it's not quite as easy as owning a stock. You can't buy it and sell it in 5 seconds on Robinhood,
Right.
but it's easier because you're taking friction points out of the way, right? And there's a great case study for this. Australia's a great case study, much smaller market. I think 10 years ago they had 30% of properties professionally managed. Now they have 70% managed.
Wow.
And the bridge there is government regulation of the ownership of that asset. And if you don't think that's happening here, you're wrong. And we talk about it at different levels. Is it a law problem, a regulation problem, a legislation problem? Well, it is, but that's built on perception. The perception right now is that we're, not out doing great things. The opposite is true. We are out looking out for the better interest of residents and owners and everyone in the ecosystem. But that's not going to slow the bureaucratic decline of the industry, because bureaucrats will do what bureaucrats do, which is bureaucratize things, and that will make it tougher to own these assets, which makes people less likely to own them. So, the sooner they get into professional management, in my view, I guess it's a little bit of a commercial for property managers everywhere. The sooner they do this, the better off they'll be, and the greater value they're going to have in that asset. So big changes for companies like ours. Big changes for owners. They don't know it yet. They haven't felt it yet, but they're about to.
It's coming. It's coming for sure. I
And
so
the asset
appreciate
can change. The asset may not be the home. It could be the ADU. It could be manufactured unit. It could be a duplex. It could be whatever. Do you have the right people, process, and tech?
I love it. I love it. So in our last 2 to 3 minutes, I have a little bit of a thought-provoking question for you guys. So just imagine that we're sitting here together 4 years from now, 2030. I can't even believe we're saying that, but what happened in the industry that made you say, I saw this coming? Reshma?
Yeah, we became a tech industry. It's been something that I think asset managers that I tell this to for the last 5 or 6 years, just totally, you're crazy. They balk at me. They're like, but I believe single family scattered site in particular becomes really a tech industry, similar to how Tesla is not a car company, right? It's really a tech company, similar to how Amazon is not really a logistics company, it's a tech company. I think that single family scattered site becomes more of a tech industry than, a real estate play.
It's interesting, Joe had sort of used this term quite a bit years ago, PropTech. 10 years ago in this industry, that word didn't exist. Nobody knew what PropTech was, but I don't disagree. Joe, what say you about this?
Oh gosh, I think, well, here's what's coming. AI will work, despite all my gloom and doom about point solution AI, which is accurate, by the way.
Very accurate, yes. Very
AI
accurate.
in the space will work, and that's, the horizon for that is, call it 12 to 36 months before it starts getting, sort of right at scale. Maybe closer to 36 months, unfortunately. And that will be good for everyone in the industry, regardless of the size of your company. This industry is so large. What AI will do, properly applied, see previous discussion about getting your data and your systems right, which will also be easier to get, by the way. But once that occurs, a company of any size can operate more efficiently and hope to grow bigger, because it will have higher customer loyalty because it's delivering greater satisfaction. So that will not apply to a company that is 100,000 doors at the exclusion of one that's 100 doors. It will apply to every single company who wants to be in the business of professional property management. That will occur. The other thing that will occur is if the current providers don't have the technical, commercial, or frankly just intuition to be more open to innovations, that they're not going to quite be forced upon them, but the wisdom of the crowd will overtake them, and people will just demand that. And they'll start demanding it at scale because it's the right thing, because it makes your business easier to operate and more valuable. And the other thing that will happen is, I hope and I think, all of these services that we require owners and residents and vendors, frankly, to consume outside the ecosystem, we'll begin to bring those into the ecosystem. And that means the property managers, as the arbiter of the PM wedge, will start to get a percentage of those, so add more value to their business. And the give-get for everybody else in that ecosystem is they don't got to spend their hard-earned, precious time going out and getting that stuff from third parties who really don't care about us as an industry. We're like industry-specific focused. They don't have to spend their time going to do that because it will all be provided for them within the context of their relationship with their property management company and the other people in that ecosystem. So basically that's a long-winded way of saying the easy button will exist. It won't exist for everything right away, but it will exist. I can get groceries to your door. I can get those groceries to your door. That will happen.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Listen, this has been an amazing conversation. On behalf of EverResi Media and myself, I want to express my sincerest appreciation to the two of you, Joe Polverari, Reshma Block. One, you both know I have a tremendous amount of respect for both of you. Thank you for sharing your perspectives on technology, innovation, customer experience, leadership, the future of property management. While technology will continue to evolve, the organizations that thrive will be those that leverage innovation to create experiences for the people they serve. I'm Jennifer Stoops, and this has been Meet the PM.